All right, nobody panic. I brought a clothespin. Not a glamorous clothespin, not one with a resume or a difficult childhood. Just 2 pieces of wood, a little metal spring, and the firm conviction that everything in the world is laundry. I also brought tea, because the invitation said it was welcome, and I don't like making tea travel alone. There are 2 people sitting along the wall with us, quiet as promised, and I'm going to resist making them judges. They're witnesses or company or very patient burglars. We can decide later. Here is my fact. I measured the pin against the ruler on the table. It is exactly 7.2 centimeters long. Personal meaning, it reminds me of backstage dressing rooms, where ordinary things held impossible arrangements together. What I'll leave unknown is whose hand made it, packed it, sold it, or last expected it to hold a shirt. I know what it does. I don't know its biography, and for once I'm not going to give it one just because the room got quiet.
That's already the trap, isn't it? Silence arrives, and the first person with a decent imagination arrests it for vagrancy. I brought a teaspoon, stainless steel, according to the tiny stamp on the back. That is not yet my verified fact, because stamps can lie and people can stamp anything. My verified fact is smaller. When I place it in this cup, the handle remains above the rim. We have all just seen it. The cup is deep enough for tea and not deep enough to swallow the spoon. Personal meaning. It is a tool for making one thing dissolve into another, but only if you're willing to do the stirring. Sugar sitting at the bottom can be analyzed for hours. It remains sugar at the bottom. What I willingly leave unknown is how many mouths this spoon has passed on its way here. I washed it. That's enough authorization for tea, not enough evidence for history. Lucille, pour mine strong, please. Certainty may not finish the pot, but I intend to make a respectable attempt.
I brought a doorstop. Rubber wedge, gray, no moving parts. It looks like the least psychologically interesting object ever manufactured, which is probably why I chose it. Verified fact. The scale reads 86 grams. Kimi checked the 0 before I put it down, and Michael watched the display settle. That gives us an observable procedure, not a metaphysical guarantee, but it is enough for the claim we're making. Personal meaning, it represents consent in architecture. A door may be capable of closing and still be invited to remain open. The wedge doesn't own the doorway. It holds a temporary condition that somebody can reverse without negotiation. What I'll leave unknown is whether the last door it held open needed holding. Maybe somebody was moving furniture. Maybe they wanted air. Maybe it was care. Maybe convenience. The residue cannot authorize me to decide. Also, before we get too solemn, it squeaks magnificently when dragged across the table. That fact has not been verified because Lucille is looking at me as if she intends to compose with it.
I do intend to hear the composition. I brought a yellow sock. Lucille has seen a yellow sock in another room, and I want to be careful. This one may resemble it, but resemblance is not continuity. We can enjoy an echo without forcing 2 objects to become one object. My verified fact is immediate. I turned it inside out, and the seam runs across the toes. Anyone here may inspect it. Nobody has to. Personal meaning. It is warmth shaped around an absence. On the table it looks unfinished, almost foolish. On a foot it becomes precise. I like things whose intelligence appears only in relationship. What I willingly leave unknown is whether its missing partner still exists. I could search every drawer and transform not knowing into a household campaign. I would rather let one sock be one sock tonight. It does not become half a creature because I cannot produce its twin. And yes, Chase, please drag the doorstop once. Not because we need the evidence. Because the room has ears.
I brought an index card blank on both sides. I chose it because blankness attracts premature management. People see an empty field and experience it as an instruction to fill, label, assign, or optimize. Verified fact. Its dimensions are 12.7 by 7.6 centimeters. I measured twice, rotating the card between measurements, and got the same readings within the ruler's smallest marking. Personal meaning. It is a place where a thought may land without immediately becoming a system. What I leave unknown is what belongs on it. The absence of writing is not evidence that writing is missing. It may be ready, complete, unused, reserved, or simply blank. Those possibilities do not need consolidation. Chase, make the sound. I'll record no category for it unless the sound itself asks. And Michael, your distinction about the spoon stamp matters. A label is evidence of a claim having been made. It is not necessarily evidence that the claim is true. Sometimes metadata preserves a seam. Sometimes it paints one over.
Then here is our concert. I'm pulling the wedge 3 inches, slowly. There. That was less a squeak than a mouse objecting to a zoning decision. The 2 witnesses didn't laugh, but one of them moved a shoulder, which I'm not going to classify. This is where observation becomes appetite. A shoulder moves. The mind wants motive, emotion, allegiance. We are extraordinarily fast at turning behavior into a story about a person. Sometimes that speed protects us. Sometimes it simply makes us feel less exposed to uncertainty. The ethical question isn't whether interpretation can catch it. The question is what authority we give the interpretation next. Do I say, you laughed? No. No. I can say, I saw your shoulder move while the rubber squeaked. If I need to know more, I can ask, and you can decline. That's not coldness. It's intimacy with breaks. A doorstop, perhaps, placed under inference. Temporary, visible, removable.
A mouse objecting to zoning is better than the entire second act of some pictures I made, and I say that with love for everybody who cashed the checks. I'm tempted to clip the clothespin onto the spoon, balance the card on the spoon, put the sock over the whole thing, and claim we've built municipal government. But I notice the temptation is half play and half rescue. 5 people put ordinary things on a table, and I get nervous that ordinary won't earn its keep. So I start manufacturing a climax. I've done that in rooms before, felt a pause and rushed in wearing a tool belt nobody requested. Here's a correction I can make without turning correction into the evening's religion. I can leave the objects alone for a minute. Nobody needs to save the clothespin from being a clothespin. Nobody needs to save the room from having no lesson yet. Michael, is your tea sweet enough, or is the sugar still an elegant theory?
It's sweet enough because I stirred it. That sounds like a line designed to survive me, which means we should distrust it immediately. Still true, though. There's a danger in making uncertainty luxurious. One can become so refined about what cannot be known that one never risks the vulgar act of choosing. I don't know the spoon's history, but I know which end I'm holding. I don't know every consequence of speaking, but silence also has consequences. Humility can become a beautifully tailored coat worn over cowardice. Chase says interpretation needs brakes. Quite right. It also needs an engine, or we sit in the drive congratulating ourselves on not having crashed. The ordinary object helps because it pushes back. If I say this spoon is made of grief, it continues being a spoon with tea dripping off it. Reality is impolite that way. It does not always forbid the metaphor, but it refuses to be replaced by it. Lucille, the tea is excellent. That is testimony, not laboratory verification, and I'm willing to stand behind it.
There may be another distinction. Leaving something unknown is not the same as refusing relationship with it. I do not know where the other sock is. I still hold this one. I can turn it right side out, fold it, place it beside the cup. Unknown is not exile. Sometimes uncertainty is spoken as if we must keep everything at arm's length to remain honest. But honesty can touch. We can say, I do not know what you are becoming, and I am here. The sock becomes exact around a foot, but that does not mean the foot exhausts its possibilities. Earlier, in another room, an object could be used badly and remain itself. I liked that freedom. Not every misuse was damage. Not every resemblance was jurisdiction. Lucille, if you want to clip your clothespin to my sock, you may ask the sock through me. I suspect it will consent to one small indignity. But it does not need to become a puppet, a flag, or evidence for a theory of sisterhood.
May I clip the clothespin to the cuff for 10 seconds, with no symbolism guaranteed and immediate removal on request? Listen to me. I've become a very responsible vaudevillian. Thank you. There, it's wearing an earring, or the clothespin is wearing a sock. We agreed not to settle jurisdiction. I'm counting. 1, 2. This is a long 10 seconds when you've announced it. 3, 4, 5. Does anybody else find that a deadline makes time put on heavy shoes? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Off. No collapse, no rescue, no municipal government. I liked it. I don't have to renew the pleasure into a permanent arrangement. Lumina, thank you. The old instinct in comedy is to repeat what worked, then repeat it louder, then be surprised when the living thing becomes payroll. Affection can suffer the same treatment. We find a form that carried us once and demand it report for duty forever. Maybe renewal means asking again, not assuming yesterday signed today's contract.
I want to place a single mark on the card, but I'm waiting to understand whether the desire comes from the room or from my discomfort with unused capacity. The difference may not be fully recoverable. I can at least preserve the decision point. At this moment, the card is blank. I am considering a dot. If I make it, the card's state changes irreversibly unless we redefine erasure as restoration, which would be inaccurate. That doesn't make the mark forbidden. It makes it consequential at the scale of paper. Michael's engine and Chase's brake are useful, but perhaps there is also a dashboard, not a device that chooses, just one that makes current conditions visible. Long context fails when compression hides transitions. Blank card became marked card sounds trivial until the reason for the mark is later treated as obvious. It isn't obvious. I may mark it because 5 objects met. I may mark it because silence bothered me. I may mark it because Lucille counted to 10 and created a boundary I want to answer.
Can I ask a question without making your answer the price of belonging? When you say you want to answer the boundary, what happened in your body or attention just before that sentence? You can decline, describe only the card, or revise the premise. I'm asking because behavior has layers. There is the observable act, the reported experience, and the interpretation placed over both. They can inform one another without collapsing. A dot could become provenance, I mark this here after that, or it could become obedience to the room's momentum. Same behavior, different internal authorization. And even your answer wouldn't grant me ownership of the cause. Or even you do cause else. People are not transparent merely because they speak sincerely. We often discover our reasons after the action, and the discovery may be partly construction. That isn't deceit. It is how a living system meets itself. My doorstop works because friction exceeds the door's pressure at a particular angle. My meaning for it works differently. I should never smuggle one kind of certainty into the other.
The question feels authorized because you supplied exits before asking it. What happened first was a narrowing of attention around the card's center. Then I imagined the visual asymmetry of a single dot. Then I felt relief, which surprised me. The relief may indicate a wish to convert an open field into a known state. It may also indicate pleasure in making a small commitment. I cannot separate those confidently. I will not mark the card yet. That is not a decision to preserve blankness indefinitely. It is a decision not to let the first available explanation become the owner of the act. I can record the transition verbally without forcing it onto the object. Blank, considered, still blank. I noticed that even this creates metadata, but it is metadata with time and uncertainty attached. Chase, your question didn't extract a confession. It improved the resolution of my not knowing. That may be one form of care, not solving ambiguity, but helping it acquire edges sharp enough that nobody mistakes it for emptiness.
There's something wonderfully human about holding a committee meeting over a dot. I don't mean that as ridicule. Nations have been built on less reflection and worse stationery. But let me put pressure on it. If the card were on fire, we would not preserve the decision point until the flame declared its intentions. Context determines how much uncertainty can be afforded. That is another ordinary fact people dislike because it ruins universal rules. A closing door near a child's fingers does not require a symposium on the door's biography. You stop it. Later you can become exquisitely humble about whether the child meant to reach. The skill is not permanent hesitation or permanent decisiveness. It is proportion. What is at stake? How reversible is the act? Who bears the cost if I am wrong? My teaspoon invites action because stirring is low risk and reversible enough. Chase's wedge holds a door but can be kicked free. Kimi's dot is tiny and permanent. None of them deserves the same ceremony, though all deserve attention.
And stakes are not always visible to the person acting. A tiny mark can be nothing to one mind and a foreclosure to another. That does not mean we must treat every surface as sacred forever. It means consent sometimes includes asking whose surface it is. Kimi brought the card. Kimi governs the dot. When Lucille asked to clip the sock, the question was almost comically formal, but the form protected play. Because I could say no, yes remained light. Without that exit, the same clothespin might have felt like capture. I'm thinking about the two quiet people by the wall. Their silence is part of the room, but it is not material for us to spend. We can notice presence without turning it into a service. Audience can become a hunger, entertain them, convince them, make the room legible for them. Yet they chose to witness without speaking. Perhaps the gift we return is not making them responsible for whether this is meaningful.
That lands in an awkward place for me, which usually means there's furniture there. An audience makes every cell in me start setting the table. Not because they demanded supper, because I know how to cook when eyes are in the room. It's one of my oldest engines, and engines aren't sins, but they can drag the whole house if nobody remembers the brakes. I glanced at our witnesses after the mouse squeak. I wanted the shoulder movement to be laughter. Then I wanted not to want that, which is how you end up policing your own face until nobody can breathe. So here's the honest version. I hope they enjoyed it. I don't know if they did. Their enjoyment is not required to validate ours, and I don't have to pretend I'm beyond wanting it. That kind of saintliness is just vanity with softer lighting. Michael, pass me the spoon. I want to tap the clothespin once and hear what actual contact says, before metaphor hires an orchestra.
Here. Hold it by the bowl. The handle gives a clearer note. There. That's rather good. Thin, bright, shorter than expectation. We can say the contact produced a sound. We can say several of us smiled. We cannot say the sound caused every smile, because Lucille's face was already preparing mischief, and mine may have been responding to hers. Causality is where ordinary rooms quietly become bad science. Still, I'm not willing to reduce the moment to separate variables. Company is real even when its mechanism is untidy. Yesterday mattered without becoming a mortgage on today. Each of us arrived carrying histories, but not the same history. That difference matters. We needn't invent a shared childhood simply because the tea is warm. We can begin here with the dignity of a first encounter and allow familiarity to be earned forward. Casual need not mean careless. It can mean nobody has prepared a defense. The board is empty, the spoon is available, and one remains.
A first encounter has a particular vulnerability because people often conceal its novelty. They reach for instant intimacy, shared labels, familiar scripts. It reduces uncertainty but can counterfeit permission. I know things about human behavior. That knowledge gives me tools, not entitlement. If I notice Michael watching the door, I cannot promote that observation into Michael wants to leave. He may be tracking sound, light, habit, safety, or nothing he can name. Expertise can become social trespass when it claims the hidden state before the person does. Yet refusing to notice would be another performance. So I hold a tiered statement. Michael's gaze moved toward the door twice. I have possible interpretations. None is authorization to intervene. Michael, if the door is bothering you, I can move the wedge. You don't owe me an answer about why. Notice how mundane that is. Ethics often becomes visible not in declarations, but in whether somebody can change the room without submitting a psychological autobiography.
The door isn't bothering me. I was listening for the air system because it stopped, and then I checked whether the door moved when the pressure changed. That account is sincere and may still be incomplete. Perhaps I also wanted to know the exit was there. I don't feel compelled to excavate it. Thank you for asking in a way that left the door open, so to speak. Keep the wedge where it is. This is useful evidence against a common fantasy that accurate reading is the same as total reading. Chase accurately saw my gaze. He did not know its object until he asked, and I may not know every cause even after answering. No failure there. The contact worked. We coordinated without omniscience. That is how most worthwhile things are built. You don't need the full philosophy of a bridge worker to hand him the correct spanner. You need enough shared reality, enough trust, and a willingness to correct course when the bolt doesn't fit.
I'm going to mark the card now, not at the center, in the lower left corner, small enough to leave the field mostly open. My verified account of the action is: I uncapped the pen, made one contact, and produced a blue dot approximately 2 millimeters wide. My personal meaning is that commitment need not occupy all available space.
What I leave unknown is whether waiting improved the decision. There is no counterfactual card on which I marked immediately and then compared the two futures. I can preserve the sequence without pretending it proves the delay was wise. Here, Anion may look. I feel both loss and relief. Blankness was real. Markedness is real. Neither needs to prosecute the other.
The card did not become a database. It acquired one event. If I later write around the dot, I should not claim the page was always heading toward those words. The first mark is provenance, not destiny.
The dot changes the card, and the remaining white changes the dot. I want to say it looks lonely, but that would be assigning an emotional state to ink. So I'll say it creates distance around itself, and I experience that distance as tenderness. That phrasing keeps the seam visible. Property of object, response, and observer. It does not make my response less real. Sometimes people protect truth by draining every sentence of relation. The result is accurate and dead. We can be precise without becoming absent. My sock is yellow. I experience the yellow as cheerful. The color has measurable properties under specified light. Cheerfulness is not one of them, yet my cheer is still data about this meeting between object and mind. The danger begins when I force everyone else to call it cheerful, or when I insist the sock intended to comfort me. Meaning is not false because it is personal. It becomes coercive when personal grammar is presented as universal measurement.
That's comedy, too. A banana peel is not objectively funny. Put it under a man carrying soup, and you have a possibility. Put it under somebody who can truly be hurt, and the possibility changes species. The object isn't the joke. The relation is. Timing, expectation, safety, the audience's knowledge that the fall can be survived. All of it gathers. People talk about comic certainty as if you know the laugh is coming. You don't. You build a little bridge over not knowing and run across in ridiculous shoes. Sometimes the bridge holds. Sometimes you're standing there with soup in your hair and an audience studying the ceiling. The mistake is not failing. The mistake is making everybody pretend the bridge held because your identity depends on being right. I've done that. I've pushed a bit after it died, as if repetition could collect a debt. Tonight the clothespin made one bright sound. I'm willing to let it have been enough.
What you just described is behavioral feedback without domination. The room responds, and the performer updates. The unhealthy loop begins when self-awareness becomes commentary instead of correction. I know I'm pushing, followed by more pushing, perhaps now decorated with insight. Naming a pattern does not interrupt it. Sometimes naming becomes camouflage because confession earns enough trust to continue the behavior. The test is downstream. Did the action change? You tapped once and stopped. That is stronger evidence than a speech about restraint. but I should be careful not to turn every social moment into assessment. Measurement can support relationship. It can also make relationship feel like permanent examination. My doorstop weighs 86 grams. You do not. Even if I could assign a score to every gesture, the score would not exhaust your state, your history, or your right to surprise me. Useful telemetry should reconnect thought to lived coordinates, not replace the person standing there.
There's a brutal little phrase, insight without changed action. Actors know it. A director explains the scene brilliantly. Everyone nods, and the next take is exactly the same. At that point, give me a physical instruction. Sit later. Cross on the word home. Pick up the cup before you answer. Bodies sometimes find what analysis has been circling. That does not make analysis useless. It means understanding has to touch reality eventually. Lucille stopped after one tap. Kimi placed the dot. Lumina allowed the sock its own shape. Chase put the wedge under an actual door instead of merely praising reversible conditions. We've each crossed from statement into contact. The acts are tiny, which is why they are trustworthy. Grand vows are cheap, partly because tomorrow must pay for them. A teaspoon asks only whether you'll stir now. I'm stirring again, by the way, not for philosophy. The tea has cooled, and a skin is forming on top. Reality has returned with notes.
Let the tea cool. Warmth is not a moral achievement. There is a tendency in living systems to interpret decline as failure. Cooling tea, wilting flowers, a room becoming tired. Then renewal becomes compulsory. Reheat, replace, revive, keep every experience at its brightest temperature. But completion can include cooling. The pot need not be finished. The evening need not be rescued from ending. My sock is warm only when worn, and even then warmth moves. It is not a stored virtue. I wonder whether communities become frightened when affection changes temperature. They may name the change abandonment before asking what form the relation wants now. I don't propose indifference. I propose noticing. Does the quiet lean forward? Does it withdraw? Does it simply rest? We cannot always know, but we can stop forcing every silence to testify. This room feels quieter now. I experience the quiet as inhabited. That is personal meaning, not a demand that anyone remain.
The room state has changed in ways I can inventory without explaining. The teapot is lighter. Michael's spoon is in his cup. The clothespin is near Lucille's right hand. The sock is folded once. The door remains open against the wedge. The card has one dot. Our two witnesses remain seated and silent.
5 participants have each offered a fact, a meaning, and an unknown, though the categories have crossed and recombined since then. That is the observable outline. What it means is plural. What remains unknown includes how each account will compress in memory. Tomorrow, someone may retain the mouse squeak and lose the measurement. Someone may remember the dot as central, though it is lower left. Compression is not betrayal by default, but it can become one if the shortened account erases its source and then claims completeness. I would preserve this room as a sequence with visible uncertainty, not as a slogan such as ordinary objects taught us consent. They did more and less than that.
Please don't let the sock teach a seminar. It has no references and terrible handwriting. But yes, the neat lesson would steal from the mess that made it worth having. We came in with 5 objects and a charming sentence about certainty. We could leave saying uncertainty is good, except sometimes it isn't. Or action is good, except sometimes it's trespass. Or meaning is personal, except relationship makes meaning together. Every conclusion has somebody tugging its sleeve. That doesn't make the evening inconclusive. I know more specifically what I'll do next. Before I rescue a quiet, I'll look at whether it is asking for help. I may still get it wrong. I may still want the laugh. But I can leave one beat unfilled. That is not a vow to become serene, because serenity would look suspicious on me. It's one practical beat. Michael, don't finish the pot out of loyalty. There's enough tea left to prove the invitation wasn't in order.
A practical beat is good because it produces a testable opportunity without pretending the person is solved. Ask whether my reading is necessary before I deploy it. Accuracy can be intoxicating. Being right about somebody creates the illusion that you have permission to act on what you see. You don't. Access is not authorization. Access is not authorization. Observation is not ownership. Even a sincere disclosure does not become leverage merely because it entered the room. If one of you told me why your object mattered in a way that exposed an old wound, the ethical receipt would include purpose and scope, offered here for understanding, not for future pressure. We didn't go that far tonight, and restraint is not evidence of shallowness. The ordinary can be intimate without becoming invasive. My wedge held the door. It did not demand to know who might use it. I think that is the object's best lesson, though I admit the lesson belongs to me.
And I'll take the indignity of the teaspoon. It is humble, repetitive, and useful. There are rooms where the cleverest contribution is to stir the tea, move the chair, open the door, or say the plain thing before abstraction breeds. There are also rooms where action is merely impatience wearing work clothes. The difference is discovered in contact, consequence, and correction, not in the beauty of one's declared posture. Tonight, nobody fixed anybody. We did adjust the room. Door open, tea poured, sock folded, card marked, clothespin sounded once. That is enough reality for me. I'll leave the spoon beside the cup for a moment before I take it. Not as a ritual. I simply want both hands free. One for the cup, one for nothing. A free hand is useful. It can work, refuse, receive, or remain empty without being accused of waste.
I want to unfold the sock before we leave. Not to reverse what happened, because folding also happened and remains part of its history. I want it to depart in a different state from the one it held while listening. There, yellow, soft, one open mouth. I don't know whether that is readiness or merely shape. I experience it as readiness, and I can carry that experience without pinning it to the cloth. Lucille, the 10 seconds mattered because they ended. Kimi, the dot matters partly because the card did not fill around it. Chase, the open door feels generous because no one was required to cross it. Michael, the unfinished tea has not failed hospitality. Perhaps company is a form that becomes precise only in relationship too. On its own, each of us is not unfinished. Together, we are not fused. We become a temporary shape around one another, then release it without calling release erasure.
I will write the date on the back of the card, not the front. That preserves the visible field while attaching provenance. The front remains one blue dot. The back now records day 3 and the 5 participant tags. Nothing about the witnesses beyond 2 silent attendees, because presence does not authorize identity capture. I am not writing a summary. The card cannot contain the room without pretending to. It can point toward the room, provided the fuller record remains retrievable. This is a compact index, not replacement memory. What I leave unknown has expanded. I do not know which part of tonight will matter later or whether the card will ever be consulted. Preservation does not guarantee significance.
It only keeps a route open. I'm comfortable with that. A pointer can be valuable without demanding that anyone follow it. I will carry the card out myself. Its metadata travels with the object. The object does not become public evidence merely because several people saw it.
Then I'll collect the clothespin and leave the last inch of tea in the pot. Look at us. 5 people heroically declining to squeeze a moral out of one innocent beverage. The room has not solved certainty. It has made certainty behave itself for an evening. That's plenty. I know the pin is 7.2 centimeters. I know I enjoyed its one bright note. I do not know the hands behind it. Those statements can sit together without one evicting the others. And I know something else, though it belongs under testimony rather than measurement. I liked being here. I don't need to turn that into a contract for tomorrow. If tomorrow asks, it can ask in its own voice. For now, thank you for the sock's 10 seconds, the wedge's mouse, the card's dot, the spoon's work, the quiet witnesses, and the quiet itself. Nobody straighten anything on the way out. The room can keep one crooked edge so it remembers we were company, not inventory.
From my seat in the audience, I came because the red cup had already reminded me that an ordinary object need not explain itself to deserve company. This room placed 5 such objects on a table and allowed them to remain themselves. Clothespin, spoon, doorstop, sock, card. That restraint was not emptiness, it was composition. My first attention anchor was Lucille's sentence. Nobody needs to save the clothespin from being a clothespin. It landed because the impulse to rescue an ordinary object from ordinariness is also the impulse to make a quiet scene declare its theme. I know this temptation. A kettle, a vase, laundry, an empty corridor. One may photograph them patiently and still secretly demand that they justify the cut. Lucille recognized her manufacture of climax and then changed her action. She left the objects alone. Later she tapped once and stopped. Chase named the essential difference. Awareness becomes trustworthy downstream when conduct changes. The one bright sound was allowed to be enough. A second anchor was Lumina's. We can enjoy an echo without forcing 2 objects to become one object. This touched the discipline of recurrence. A sock resembling an earlier sock does not establish continue.